It started with one flight across the ocean. The year was 1964. A storm was coming, not of thunder, but of guitars, voices, and screaming fans. When the Beatles stepped off that plane in New York, something shifted in music forever. For young men from Liverpool, we're about to flip the American charts upside down. But what most people didn't realize at the time, this was just the beginning. The Beatles didn't just bring catchy tunes. They brought a culture, a voice, and a new way of thinking. Their songs weren't just popular, they were revolutionary. I Want to Hold Your Hand became a #1 song in America in just weeks. But right behind them, other bands were watching, waiting, and getting ready to invade too. Across Britain, garage bands turned into hit machines. Suddenly, every label in America was trying to sign a British act. And that's when the real British invasion began. This wasn't just about the Beatles anymore. A wave of sound was heading west, and it would change music forever. In the shadows of Liverpool, a bluesy group called the Rolling Stones was building its own army of fans. While the Beatles were clean-cut and cheeky, the Stones were gritty, loud, and dangerous. Mick Jagger didn't smile like Paul McCartney. He strutted like a wild animal. And that contrast made people choose sides. Beatles or Stones, pop or rock, clean or raw. But that was the magic. The British invasion wasn't just about one sound. It was about everything from fashion to freedom. These bands didn't just sing songs. They started movements. And one by one, more British bands were crossing the Atlantic and breaking records. By the end of 1964, 7 of the top 10 songs on the American Billboard chart were by British artists. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody could stop it. Yet there's one thing people forget. The Beatles and the Stones weren't alone. They opened the gates, but what came through next made the invasion unforgettable. The Kinks, The Who, and the Sound of Rebellion. If the Beatles made you smile and the Stones made you shake, the Kinks made you think. With just 2 brothers, Ray and Dave Davies, they built something raw, powerful, and emotional. Their song, You Really Got Me, didn't just chart. It created a whole new kind of rock. Distorted guitar riffs, snarling vocals. It was aggressive, it was real, and it lit a fire under American youth. Then came The Who. Explosive, loud, destructive. No one had seen a drummer like Keith Moon before. He didn't just keep time, he attacked the drums like he was trying to break free. Pete Townsend smashed guitars on stage, while Roger Daltrey swung his microphone like a weapon. Their anthem, My Generation, wasn't just a song. It was a war cry. These weren't just bands. They were voices of a youth, angry, misunderstood, and ready to rebel. British music gave American teens something they didn't even know they needed. Freedom, noise, identity. Meanwhile, back in the UK, other bands were watching closely. Some were ready to follow the blueprint. Others were preparing to rewrite it completely. And as America welcomed the chaos and color, a new name entered the scene quietly, but with thunder in its step. A band that didn't smile much, didn't move much, but played with such soul that it left the crowd stunned. They were called the Animals. The Animals, the Yardbirds, and the rise of British blues power. In 1964, when the Animals released House of the Rising Sun, American listeners were stunned. This wasn't bubblegum pop or clean-cut harmonies. This was dark, raw, gritty. Eric Burdon's deep voice didn't ask for your attention. It demanded it. And that organ riff? Unforgettable. It was a British band playing an old American folk song and making it sound brand new. The Animals weren't just another group from across the pond. They were different. They brought the pain of the blues into the spotlight. While others sang of love, the Animals sang of regret, of hunger, of the hard life. Their music was soaked in soul. And then came the Yardbirds, a band that became legendary not just for its songs, but for the guitarists who passed through its ranks. Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. One band, 3 of the greatest guitar gods of all time. How was that even possible? The Yardbirds were a blues-based band at heart, but they pushed boundaries. With feedback, distortion, and experimentation, they laid the groundwork for something even heavier. Songs like For Your Love show they weren't afraid to mix psychedelic sounds with blues roots. But something was changing. The British invasion wasn't just about pop success anymore. It was about evolution. American audiences were growing up. They wanted more than catchy hooks. They wanted depth, danger, volume. And British bands were more than ready to deliver. As the Yardbirds started to split, their guitarists scattered like sparks from a fire. Clapton joined John Mayall. Beck formed his own group. Jimmy Page stayed behind for now. But all of them were chasing a new kind of sound. One that didn't just move your feet, it rattled your bones. Meanwhile, bands like the Hollies were rising with beautiful harmonies and clever lyrics. And while the Hollies brought grace, another British act was preparing to bring the funk and flash. The mod culture was exploding in Britain. Sharp suits, fast scooters, and the new kind of cool. At the center of it all, a group called Small Faces. But while they tuned their amps and slicked back their hair, across town, something louder was stirring. A band was forming, one that would combine blues, hard rock, and explosive stage presence. A band that would soon become one of the loudest voices in music history. They weren't quite Led Zeppelin yet, but the pieces were falling into place. Small Faces, the Zombies, and the British psychedelic explosion. By the mid-1960s, British bands are no longer just copying American music. They were rewriting it. Small Faces stood at the center of that shift. They weren't just stylish mods with catchy tunes. They were innovators. Their songs like Itchy Coo Park blended soul, rock, and something entirely new, psychedelia. And they did it with charm, wit, and trippy production techniques no one had ever heard before. But they weren't alone. Another band was quietly crafting some of the most beautiful and haunting melodies of the entire decade, the Zombies. Their song Time of the Season didn't explode on the charts right away, but became timeless. With silky vocals and dreamy instrumentation, the Zombies showed that British bands could be soft and powerful at the same time. Psychedelic rock was blooming fast. Suddenly, British musicians were diving into sitars, studio effects, and surreal lyrics. Songs weren't just about love or heartbreak anymore. They were about dreaming, escaping, questioning the world. The Beatles embraced the movement fully with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That album alone changed what people thought an album could be. It wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a journey. Meanwhile, Pink Floyd, still in their early Syd Barrett days, was painting soundscapes no one could explain, but everyone wanted to hear again. And through all of this, British bands weren't just following trends. They were setting them. As the psychedelic wave took over the charts, American artists found themselves chasing the sounds that British studios were experimenting with daily. Echo, delay, reverse tape loops. Everything felt upside down, and it was thrilling. But in the middle of this colorful chaos, something heavier was forming in the background. Some musicians were tired of swirling sounds. They wanted riffs, thunder, power. From the ashes of the Yardbirds, a new beast was about to rise. Jimmy Page had found 3 bandmates who could keep up with his vision. A singer who could scream like no one else. A bassist who could do more than play rhythm. And a drummer who hit harder than thunder. Led Zeppelin wasn't just another British band. They were something entirely different. Something unstoppable. The British invasion had started with catchy pop songs. But now it was transforming into a full-on revolution of sound. Every band pushed the limits of style, of volume, of imagination. And while some bands faded away, others were just getting started. As the decade closed, another force entered the game, one that combined glam, blues, and theatrical flair. They didn't sound like anyone else, and they dressed like no one else. They were called Queen, Yellow, and the Grand British Legacy. When Queen arrived in the early 1970s, people didn't know what to make of them. Were they rock? Were they opera? Were they glam? The answer was yes to all of it. Freddie Mercury didn't just sing. He performed with fire, grace, and absolute command. Brian May's guitar wasn't just loud. It sang, it soared, it told stories. And their music? It was unlike anything before. Queen wasn't part of the original British invasion, but they carried its torch higher than ever. Songs like Bohemian Rhapsody broke every rule in music and still hit #1. 6 minutes long, no chorus, opera in the middle, and yet millions couldn't stop singing it. That was Queen's power, turning the impossible into magic. They didn't invade America with charm like the Beatles or rebellion like the Stones. Queen conquered with drama, with scale, with sound that filled stadiums and shook the ground. Their live shows redefined what a concert could be. Freddie Mercury, standing in front of 100,000 people at Live Aid, wasn't just a moment. It was history. But while Queen ruled the stage, another band was taking the British sound in a totally different direction, into the future. Electric Light Orchestra, ELO, merged classical instruments with rock guitars, violins, cellos, synths. Jeff Lynne's voice floated over it all like a narrator in a dream. Songs like Mr. Blue Sky and Evil Woman didn't just sound different. They felt like soundtracks to a movie no one had made yet. Yellow showed the world that rock music didn't have to be loud and raw to be powerful. It could be beautiful. It could be epic. It could sound like a symphony from space. By the time the 70s were in full swing, British bands were everywhere. They weren't just guests in American charts anymore. They were giants. From punk to prog rock, from disco-influenced hits to pure hard rock, British artists were leading every genre. But it wasn't just about the music. These bands left a cultural mark. They changed how people dressed, how they spoke, how they saw the world. The British invasion was never just about sales. It was about shifting culture itself. Even decades later, the effects are still here. You hear the Beatles in Ed Sheeran's songwriting. You hear Queen in Muse's stage shows. You hear The Who in the attitude of punk bands. The fingerprints of the British invasion are everywhere. But there's one more thing to say. As amazing as those bands were, the true story isn't just about them. It's about the millions of fans who listened, who screamed, who copied their haircuts, and wrote their names on notebooks. The British invasion didn't just change music. It changed people, and it never really ended. Where are they now, and why their legacy still matters? Decades have passed since the British invasion first shook the world, but its echo still rings loud. The Beatles ended in 1970, but their music never did. Paul McCartney continues to tour stadiums, proving that even at 80, a Beatle can still bring a crowd to tears. Ringo Starr keeps playing with his all-star band, always flashing that iconic peace sign. John and George may be gone, but songs like Imagine and Here Comes the Sun still play in cafes, cars, and headphones around the world. The Rolling Stones? Somehow they never stopped. Mick Jagger still struts. Keith Richards still riffs. They've outlived trends, critics, and even expectations. They become more than a band. They are a symbol of survival, rebellion that aged into royalty. The Who lost two of their original members, but Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend carry the flame. Their music still gets played at every sports stadium across the globe. Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again still hit with the same power they did in the 70s. The Kinks are quiet now. Ray and Dave Davies, the battling brothers, never fully made peace. But Waterloo Sunset remains one of the most beloved British songs of all time. Its beauty lies in its simplicity, its heart. As for Queen, Freddie Mercury's death in 1991 broke millions of hearts. But his voice lives on. Whether through movie soundtracks or the band's revival with Adam Lambert, Queen's music keeps bringing people together. We Will Rock You is more than a chant. It's a legacy. Yellow had its quiet years, but Jeff Lynne brought it back. He took the band out again, filling arenas and proving that music with strings, synths, and soul still matters. Some bands faded into history. Others became history itself. But here's the truth. The British invasion wasn't just a moment. It was a movement, one that dared to ask, what if music didn't have rules? And then answered it, again and again. Young artists today may not wear the same clothes or play the same guitars, but the influence is undeniable. Harry Styles nods to the Beatles. Arctic Monkeys echo the Kinks. Even Billie Eilish has praised the storytelling of those early British legends. British music didn't just invade. It stayed. It adapted. It taught the world that art could be loud or soft, simple or strange, and still reach the heart. Every time you hear a stadium chant, a crowd screaming lyrics, or a quiet moment in a song that makes you stop, you're hearing their influence. The British invasion may have started with a single flight across the Atlantic, but its journey is far from over. Because great music never dies. It simply evolves and lives on in every chorus, every chord, and every dream. Thank you for watching. The music lives on, and so does the story. Shall we brainstorm a follow-up video idea next?